You're so young and you've just raised a $11 million round. You're at the back of it and you're the founder of Pronto. What's a typical day in your life?
There is no typical day in my life. There are days where I have breakfast in Mumbai, lunch in Gurgaon, and dinner in Bangalore. And I don't know what percent the typical 23-year-old spends on social versus work, but for me, it's like 0% social. But I think every time I think about do I want to go hang out with friends? There's nothing I'd rather do than work.
It'd be so interesting to dissect what are people actually using Pronto for.
Sweeping, mopping, and utensils, or washing utensils is by far the most popular. So there are three things the customer cares about: quality, safety, and reliability. And the way to win is just execution on those three things. Just start doing. So we have been live for 7 months and we're doing 7 figures in revenue.
That's amazing. You raised a 2 million seed round, and then obviously there's a 11 million that just happened, which is Series A.
First round we did in early Feb, and then second round was actually end up signing the term sheet first week of May. I think people have severe misconceptions over how fundraising works, especially at the early stage. So I think people think at early stage, your deck matters, or your idea matters a lot, or that investors want to see traction. That is not at all the case. Building in a market which people said was impossible to solve because everyone was suffering, right? Like customers didn't get what they needed, professionals were not able to find work, and no one benefited. But when you bring about change and you build a platform that helps everyone, you very much can do that while being a profitable business.
Welcome to Humans of Bombay, Anjali.
Thank you.
It's amazing to have you here, especially because you're so young and you've just raised a $11 million round. You're at the back of it and you're the founder of Pronto, which we're going to talk all about. But we're really going to dissect what got you to that point. How did you ideate? How do you execute? And I think it's going to be an amazing conversation for anybody who's looking to start up, right? So thank you for the time and very excited to uncover your journey.
Excited to be here.
Okay, so tell me, how did you arrive at the idea of Pronto? Let's just get straight into it. And for those who are watching, you're 23 years old, and you've already established a platform where people genuinely find the need, and there's a direct product market fit, right? So how did you arrive here?
Yeah, I think the ideation process started with understanding. The consumer problem is, I think, something everyone faces the pain point, right? And I think I saw this both as on the one-off instances where it's very difficult to find someone. You are throwing a party, you need someone to come clean up before, and you go on My Gate, you ask your neighbors, you ask the guards of society, get a list of phone numbers, call all them, and most of them can't come. Someone comes, they do a poor job, and they haggle you for money. It's just end to end a very, very high friction process. And I think in my head, it made less sense in the context of, everything delivered in 8 minutes off Blinkit. So if goods are so easy to access, why are services still so difficult to access? And so I was thinking about this, and I thought, perhaps this is a top of funnel supply problem, right? There's just not enough labor in the market. Yeah, so we started to do our diligence there. So Aman, who was on our ops team, he was like our first employee, and we did a survey in the labor market. And what we found is actually the vast majority of workers who are in this supply pool are underemployed or unemployed for many months out of the year, and they face income instability. So I was like, this makes very little sense. Like, I, as a consumer, can't find these workers, and these workers can't find customers, right? So I was like, okay, there's clearly a supply-demand matching problem here, where the disorganization of the market makes it complete, and the offline nature makes it very inefficient, right? And you have this discoverability problem. And so I looked at kind of the previous iterations of solving this problem, and they were all this Uber-style matching platform. Everyone wants to be Uber for X, right? And the problem with that is that it assumes that the only problem is discoverability, right? But the reality is, in this market, for customers, the pain points don't just end with discoverability. It's quality, safety, and reliability that are truly lacking. So these three things are what customers care about most. And an unmanaged marketplace, like an Uber-style matching platform, doesn't solve for those three things. And so I realized that, actually, a different business model is required here. And I think I had spent a lot of time studying different businesses and business models, and my own theory of this is just a business model is a type of solution, right? And different problems in the world beget different types of solutions. And I realized that, like, okay, this problem is not what it appears to be to most people who try to solve it. And in fact, it requires a different type of solution, right? Therefore, a different business model to solving it. And that's how we came to what is today Pronto, was this kind of insight. And I think the other piece of this is, understanding that, okay, it's not a top of funnel supply constrained business or a supply constrained market. It is a high quality supply pool constrained market. And if this is the constraint, then the key to kind of scaling this business is, can you scale a high quality supply pool, which requires understanding and solving for the pain points of the workers in this market. And therefore, as your business model has to have that in the DNA. It's not just caring for what the customers think about and what the customers value, but also what the workers value.
Got it. So do you remember your first customer that
I do.
booked your service?
I do.
So tell us all about it.
So we ran our first pilot in Delhi.
Yeah.
And this guy Gaurav booked our service. He lived in Pithampura. And it was a feeling of elation that is like hard to describe. I couldn't believe that someone actually like found us and found enough value in what we were doing. And it was this validation that, like, okay, like this is a real problem, and this is also just a real solution to this problem. And we were so excited. And to this day, I think that's one of the happiest moments of my life. And then immediately after we got the first booking, we got the second and the third and the fourth, and we had not enough workers, and it was just like completely a mess. But that first booking was truly special. And then the next day he booked again.
Wow.
And yes, Gaurav booked again, and that was the second happiest moment of my life. Like that was like this like, okay, this is a solution that people really do value.
Yeah.
And I also remember when we launched our second pilot, which was in Gurgaon, after we stopped doing Delhi. Delhi was insane. Delhi is the worst place to run a pilot for something like this, when you're like this, like, kind of completely like just two kids running this, because it's just too far spread out and the customers are crazy and everything was insane. And Gurgaon was much easier. But we launched our pilot in Gurgaon a month later. And our first booking was this guy who booked. He lived next to a gym in Sector 55, and he made like a quote unquote instant booking. He made the first ever instant booking. All the bookings prior to that were scheduled. He made the first ever instant booking, which is our 10 minutes or less, and we made it there on time. And I could not believe that we actually did it. And I was again just like over the moon, that people really found value. And I think that elation and really that sense of wonder actually hasn't gone away, right? And I think like even post raising money, launching, every time I see a booking, like I feel that same sense of wonder and honestly this like gratitude and like towards our customer, and just like that belief in us, the belief in the vision. And
do you remember how many bookings you got in the first? That's 24 hours after launching.
So in the Delhi pilot, which is like, or in our like as Pronto, I guess which one are we talking about? As Pronto.
Pronto, yeah.
I think our first day we had like 15 bookings.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's all word of mouth.
All word of mouth. So it was actually people who had booked us during our pilots, and then when we reformed as Pronto, they were our customers, and so a little bit cheating to say 15. But yeah, I'm writing these handwritten letters to all of our first customers, because I think while we have like belief from our investors, and that's obviously validation, more than anything, it was the belief of our first customers which got us where we are today.
Yeah, it also gives you that sense of, okay, it's real and it's happening, and I should keep going.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So is there a form of almost verification that you provide for the, as you said, quality is such a huge benchmark. It's not just the fact that there's discoverability. Okay, I know that there's this pool of unskilled or how do you say it? It's in an unstructured pool, so to speak.
Yeah.
How do you measure for quality? How do you understand that these people are qualified to perform a particular service?
Yeah. So we own kind of the labor supply chain, quote unquote, end to end. So it starts with our recruiting process. So we have an in-house team who does that top of funnel work. And then there's a screening process. So a trainer meets with like every potential candidate one-on-one and with a face-to-face screening, and they're screening for behavioral characteristics, physiological characteristics, and then intent. And intent is very important for us because it informs attitude post joining the platform. Then if someone passes screening, they are placed in a training program, in a batch.
How long is the training program?
That is 5 days. And so it covers hard skills, which is, the actual how to do each cleaning task. And then there's soft skills. And soft skills are communication with the customer, greeting, politeness, and then grooming and hygiene is covered as well. And then kind of tech literacy. So how to use Google Maps, how to use the Pronto app, and then also Pronto values. So kind of the rules of the platform and regulations. But the vast majority of time is spent on the hard skills and soft skills training.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So how does it work? Which is under 10 minutes, right? Like that's the, I checked out your app and the website, and it says basically you get this service at your doorstep in under 10 minutes, which is insane. How does it work? So obviously like a quick commerce model is where you have dark stores and you have goods that are kept in these particular dark stores. How does it work when you're dealing with labor?
Yes. So we have hubs, not dark stores. And these are kind of rooms that have a bathroom, water, first aid, and they're much smaller than a dark store. And they also have no CapEx. So our cost is very low. And so if you think about kind of the P&L structure, no CapEx, and the fixed cost per store or hub for us is quite low. But these hubs have very carefully chosen locations. And so these locations are designed, and the polygons around, which are like the 10-minute radius, are designed to allow basically the delivery of service to be in 10 minutes. And so I think we are very, very careful with where we place the hubs, and kind of we even look at how it like surfaces to different throughways, to different roads, traffic patterns. All of that goes into kind of getting the 10-minute delivery time.
Got it. How does India consume Pronto? Tell me a little bit about the demographics. I know that you guys are operational in 4 to 5 locations from what I saw on the website. But what is the service that is consumed the most? It'll be so interesting to dissect what are people actually using Pronto for.
Yeah, in terms of actual services, sweeping, mopping, and utensils, or like washing utensils is by far the most popular.
Just washing utensils or sweeping and washing utensils?
Well, so you can choose any like set of tasks that you want.
Okay.
But the services that are like the tasks that are most commonly availed are sweeping and mopping and washing utensils, and then bathroom cleaning and kitchen cleaning and all of that comes after that.
How much does it typically cost?
So we don't charge. Well, so I guess we do charge sort of we have a time-based model, and that comes to roughly $250 per hour. And then we have a service-based pricing model, which actually also comes to about $250 per hour if you price it out.
Got it. And these are what people have used Pronto for the most.
So I think in terms of kind of use cases, I'd bucket it into 3 things. One is like the primary use case. So we have a good portion of customers who we are their primary and only house help. So they don't use offline house help anymore. And these people could be using us several times a week or every day or multiple times a day. Then you have people who are using us for the supplementary use case where they realize, hey, my house help doesn't have time to do this task. I can get this done through Pronto, or my house help doesn't come on certain days, and I use Pronto for that. Or it's something like, I used to get my fans cleaned once every 2 weeks, and now because of Pronto, I can get my fan cleaned every week, right? And so kind of the availability and ease of access for the service actually encourages people to use it more. In the same way that Uber saw the same thing happen, where ease of access to transportation actually led to people just taking more taxis than they did before.
Got it. Because you just have so much more access, and it's so easy to use as well, right? Like
it's ease of access.
Correct. but also like ease of use, because
Yes.
earlier I know that there were few iterations, but the fact that now it's in this app that I can understand, right? Like anybody can understand. It's just more
Yes.
access.
Yes.
So how much of, if you had to give me a percentage, these three, which is mopping, sweeping, and utensils, what is the percentage in terms of revenue that this occupies?
Probably half.
Wow, really?
Yes. And I think these are kind of the core set of services, which this reflects kind of the use case, which
Yeah.
is people are using it for their daily routines, right? And these are the services that people use.
So you were saying 50%, and then
Yeah. So I think this kind of reflects the use cases, right? So mopping, sweeping, utensils are pretty much the core set of services that people get done every day, right?
Mhm.
Like if they're going to get anything done, it's that. And so it reflects that people are using this as their primary service, rather than kind of the absenteeism use case, which you might expect, which is like my house help is missing for the day.
Got it. And which are your markets, right, as of now?
So Gurgaon, Delhi, Noida in NCR, and then we are also live in Mumbai and Bangalore.
Okay, so what's your revenue, and how long have you been active?
Yeah, so we have been live for 7 months, and we're doing 7 figures in revenue.
That's amazing. So tell me a little bit about how you went about the fundraising process, right? Because a lot of our viewers would be interested in how do you actually go about it. And I know that you were in venture cap before you actually started your journey of being in a startup founder. So you raised a 2 million seed round, and then obviously there's a 11 million that just happened, which is Series A, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so it was 3 months in between those 2 rounds. So first round we did in early Feb, and then second round was actually we ended up signing the term sheet first week of May.
Okay.
Then we restructured the company and then closed the round. So that took some time for restructuring.
So how do you go about it? Like for people who are watching who want to actually get into this process, right? Like how would you advise them to go about it?
Yeah, I think people have severe misconceptions over how fundraising works, especially at the early stage. So I think people think at early stage, your deck matters, or like your idea matters a lot, or that, investors want to see traction. That is not at all the case. Reality is investors care about only one thing, and in the earliest stages, which is you, the founder. And their entire bet is on the person. Reason being, the business does not exist, right? Like I can like kind of wring my hands and think of 100 ways this idea could go wrong, but I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Like there are infinite ways it could go wrong, right? And like it's not a bet on like business model. It's not a bet on even the space they're in, right? Because investors actually underwrite early stage founders to pivot, right? They expect you to change your idea. They expect you to change your business model. They expect you to change everything. The only thing that's unchanged is the founder. It's the person bet. So I think I did not understand this, when I was first fundraising either. But I thankfully got lucky in that, when I met investors, they were able to see that. And so I think I only realized post closing, and probably like maybe even like a month after closing that first round, that like, oh, actually, like, yeah, they didn't care at all about what I was building. In fact, they were very like I recently was catching up with my seed investors, and they were like, we're shocked that you actually built this business. And I was like, that's crazy. That's like slightly insulting, like a backhanded compliment that you're saying that it's crazy that you built this, and we're like blown away. But I think that like really proves it for them. It was not at all about kind of the idea that I presented to them, which and was the same idea that I ended up building, but just all about the person. I think as you get later stage, the nature of fundraising changes, right? So when you are fundraising for the first time and as a very early stage founder, it's all about the founder. You run your processes differently, right? So as a very early stage company, it's all about like building FOMO, and you close your process very fast. You like build momentum by speaking to a lot of investors at once. Then you get through the process and you get one term sheet, and then you very quickly accelerate. And the whole process takes, a week and a half to close your round. As you get later stage, the nature of fundraising changes because it is like less percent about the founder, more percent about the business and numbers, right? And so I'd say like your seed round is 100% founder, 0% business. By the time you get to Series B, it's more like 50-50, right? And so, and I think as you get even later stage, it continues to change. And the nature of fundraising changes as well in the terms of the process, right? Because there's no diligence to be done in a seed round, right? Like if an investor tells you they're doing diligence, that's like they're just like buying time, right? There's no diligence to be done. But as you get later stage, there's actual numbers to look at. There's a business to look at. There are real things to underwrite, or that they have to underwrite, especially given the price that they're going to be paying. And so I think that is always a nuance that I think every founder at least goes through in every fundraise, because it's probably for a first time in founder especially, the changing nature is something that you have to experience to understand.
Got it. You're also defying a permanent winter funding situation for women, right? Where it's just very difficult, and a lot of women have been very vocal about the fact that it's been tough. So was it easy, or did you feel like you kind of had to stretch to make the fundraise happen?
Yeah. So I will say all of my capital raised came from global investors, largely US-based investors. And I think they have a different mindset. That being said, I do think definitely it is tougher because the behavioral characteristics that one might prize in a founder, I think it's easier for people to take it the wrong way if you're a woman versus if you're a man, if that makes sense.
How does age play out? Like, has it been you're too young, or have you not faced that, both internally and externally, right? Because one is raising the funds, and then you have people who are probably older than you reporting into you or managing teams in your company. How has that worked for you?
Yeah, I think on the fundraising side, there's two types of investors. And the types of investors who I have are very much pro young founders. And I think the idea is this is a market where that no one has cracked before, right? And everyone was building based on priors, right? They looked at precedent, and they did things the way things had been done before, and then it didn't work, right? And so to solve a very hard problem takes a very crazy person, but also takes someone building from first principles, right? And which means it's actually better to be super young because you have no priors, you have nothing that you're basing kind of your decisions off of. You figure out everything from first principles. So I think our investors actually saw it as a value add for me to be very young. Internally, I mean, vast majority of the team is older than me. I think
How big is the team?
So we are about 230 people.
This is just does this
on roll. Yeah,
But does this include the people who provide the service?
No,
it doesn't. So what's your net? Like, you have 230 people who are obviously in sitting in your offices. What about the people who are actually providing services? How many people do you work with?
Yeah, that's over 1,000.
Wow. Okay.
So vast majority of our actual our corporate employees are older than me. I guess less than 10 are younger than me. I think our oldest team member, I believe, is late 30s. And we have quite a few team members in their 30s. I think I've never had an issue of someone kind of not respecting me because of my age. And if they didn't respect me, they wouldn't have signed up to work at Pronto. Yeah, so I think it's a self-fulfilling thing. And I actually, even in interviewing candidates, I don't really have this issue. But I guess it's because someone who had an issue would not take an interview, or would not even interview with me. And so I think I haven't had this issue, but I think it's a self-selecting thing.
Got it. So when you raise a lot of money, which is you just did $11 million round in 7 months, it comes with its own challenges, right? Because it's not bootstrapped. You have the responsibility and accountability of somebody else's capital that they've invested in you. Does that, as a 23-year-old, ever get overwhelming at all?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
I think it comes with a lot of responsibility, right? So I think especially between our first two fundraisers, we had very little accountability with what we did with the first round of funding. There were no terms to it. But obviously that we had to kind of become much more formalized post the second funding round. So building out a lot of our accounting and finance and all of this, which we needed to do anyways, right? Like whether we were going to be venture backed or not, it was going to happen. But the maturity curve of the organization ends up being much, much steeper, right? So you have to mature as an organization, become much more formalized, build out a lot of functions much faster if you're venture backed. I think, does it get overwhelming? No. I think I wouldn't say any of this is overwhelming. Where I feel the pressure is not from investors. It's more of like are we building fast enough? It's more of like the intrinsic business, and building faster and winning, and that side of it is where the pressure comes from, and not at all from our investors. I think we actually have wonderful investors who,
it can be internal as well.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying it's external.
No, I know, but like I would say like I think we've carefully selected our investors, such that like they're not the type that make me feel pressure, and even internally I don't feel this pressure. It's more like it's more of I think if you see funding as the accomplishment, then you're more likely to feel it as pressure. I don't see funding or any fundraising as an accomplishment. It's more like the game has just begun, right? Or like it's day zero. That's what I think when we've raised funding. And in that sense, then the pressure, or even internally, doesn't come from the funding. It comes from the business.
Correct. How do you scale from here?
Yeah. So I think the first lever for kind of expansion and growth is geo expansion, right? So we're launching kind of across cities, both Mumbai and Bangalore and Delhi, Hyderabad and Pune.
Very nice.
And then launching more cities from there, and that's the first lever. And then second lever is kind of category expansion. So thinking about what other services we want to offer, and I have like kind of framework set up for that, and so there's a lot of experimentation going on now, and what we see working out and has positive unit economics, we will kind of scale from there.
Can you give me an example of what a new service could be?
Yeah, so something like pet care is we see as a big opportunity. Like in our research, there are people in Mumbai that are paying 400 rupees an hour for dog walking, right? Like that's clearly like a very attractive market. And so I think like a lot of these additional home services which fit within kind of our criteria are kind of where we'll go after first. And then there's a broader array which go after kind of our longer term vision for the company, which we'll launch. And that's kind of in the like 5-year vision. And then the third lever for kind of growth is further saturation of our existing markets. So that's, new customer acquisition within the same city. That's increasing frequency within our existing like customer base, and also increasing ticket size and number of services booked.
Got it. How do you acquire the customer? How has it worked so far? In say like if you pick a market like Gurgaon, how did you acquire your first set of customers?
Word of mouth.
Purely word of mouth. There was no marketing dollars?
We did
there?
Extremely little marketing for the first kind of 3 months or 2.5, 3 months of the company's life. We handed out flyers in the local community, and then from there it was just growing through word of mouth. I mean, I think this is a business where people actually talk a lot about it. Like, this is a very common topic of discussion is house help, and
100%.
Especially if you look in like women's groups within like WhatsApp groups, within societies, this is like very often discussed, which means it is very ripe for kind of viral growth in that sense. And so word of mouth was how we acquired pretty much all of our first customers, or really for the first 2.5 months, it was all through word of mouth.
And then post that?
I mean, then as we started scaling and launching in areas that we had no presence in, it's a lot of, there's classic offline marketing, but there's also, digital ads, so Meta and Google.
Got it. And what's worked the best? Just to pick your brain. Right?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth has worked the best.
Word of mouth is the best way to grow.
Of course it is.
I mean, it's a function of customer NPS as well.
Yeah. And what's your repeat customer? Like how often does the same person book your service?
Yeah, we have people using us every single day. We have people using us twice a day. There are people who use us 3 times a day.
Really?
Yes.
And for the same service, or like different services, like spread across categories?
Spread across categories. I think you see very consistently, at least once a day, they're booking mopping, sweeping, utensils. People who are using us 3 times a day, there's someone who's booked us to wash utensils morning, afternoon, and evening. After every meal, they book Pronto to wash their utensils.
Okay. Awesome. So, when you're in an industry like this, right, where you're organizing labor and it's basically a means to an end, and you're providing it quickly, you're providing it at scale. How do you factor for dignity of labor? What does it typically mean in this situation, and how do you stand for it?
Yes. I think there's multiple pieces to this. I also think the number one lever for partner retention is just their experience on the platform. And the main driver of that is dignity and respect. So I think the unfortunate reality is that in the offline world, these workers have very little respect and very little dignity. People treat them kind of as beneath them. And the other unfortunate reality is that like they face a lot of abuse, and they do not have the ability to kind of stand up for themselves in the offline world, right? Which is if something happens, if they leave, they lose their income.
Yeah.
And no one will take their side, right? And because customers always have more power in the community, right? And so I think one of the big things is, when we part of our training is, if you ever feel unsafe, if you feel disrespected, you should walk out immediately. You should report it to us immediately, and we will stand up for you, and we have your back. And I think it's the very first time where they're empowered, and there's like a company, like someone with actual power that's standing up for them. And what that does is it gives them agency, and agency is a key thing. In the offline world, unfortunate reality, but most kind of house help have zero agency, and that's part of what we provide to them. So I think that's one piece of it is just that, like ingraining with them that like if something happens at the customer's home, we have your back and you don't have to just accept it. The second piece of it is the stuff that we do, right? And so one of the very core values of Pronto and of the entire team is kind of respect for our Pronto professionals, or respecting the pros. And I think I think this is a very top down thing, like, and it has to be top down, and I think it's also something that has to be constantly maintained. And I think currently like our hub managers are very, very good. Like they're all super respectful, but I think it's a zero tolerance attitude towards that disrespect is super important. And I think the other piece of it is there is dignity to being in a formalized platform, and this is for the vast majority of Pronto professionals. This is the first kind of formal employment that they've had, and that does a lot for them, right? Like one is there's a lot of dignity of saying like, okay, I actually work at a company, versus in the offline world, they don't have like an employer of record, if you will, right? And so that brings to them like also a amount of like respect, where like their work is meaningful because they have a platform to their name, and or a company to stand with. And so I think that's another piece of it. I think the other piece of it is like making people feel like part of the team, right? And so like we speak about kind of like these platforms and like gig workers, but I think the number one way is just like treating them like they are as much part of the team as anyone else, and that's super important. It's like on the Valley, like we gave them all boxes of Mehta and that sort of thing, and so I think that is super, super important to us. And I think just the unfortunate reality is we're fighting against the tide a bit, where it's like in a society where these people aren't kind of treated with respect, it's on us to actually drive that change, right? And to get people to view this sector of the economy and this type of work differently, right? Like it is as worthy of respect and dignity as any other profession. And so there's like that amount of having to kind of change that and bring about that change, and drive perception and like kind of this change in perception. And I think that's something I'm very, very passionate about. And like I think it's going to take time to change perceptions within society, and I have no illusions about that. But I think that is one of the like kind of core parts of the mission of building Pronto. And it's not even a business thing. Like there's nothing to do with the business or profit to drive that change, but it's something that like I think we are morally responsible to do.
Yeah. So when it almost sounds like a movement, right? So when it is a movement and a business, how do you prevent both from diverging? How do you kind of maintain that balance or equilibrium?
Yeah, I think every decision has to be made with our Pronto pros in mind, right? And keeping their interests in mind, right? And so I think when you start to make decisions purely for profit and don't consider the impact on Pronto pros or professionals, that's where you kind of see this diverge, or the mission of kind of driving this change in perception and driving, more respect for them versus profit. Like if those two things are like, you shouldn't make decisions that trade off one versus the other. Like make decisions that kind of benefit both. And I truly believe we are building a win-win-win business, as in customers benefit, partners benefit, and shareholders benefit, right? And I think this is very much possible to do, and I will push back on anyone who disagrees with me. But I think it also has to deal with market structure, right? Like we're building in a market which people said was impossible to solve because everyone was suffering, right? Like customers didn't get what they needed, professionals were not able to find work, and no one benefited. But when you bring about change and you build a platform that helps everyone, you very much can do that while being a profitable business.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you actually stick to the idea, right? Everybody has so many different ideas. A lot of people juggle or struggle with the fact that I have so many different thoughts in my head on which way to go. How do you know which one to pick and which one to stick with?
Yeah. So I was in college when I thought of this. It was like my last year, and I had no classes, which is how I came to this in the fall. And then I moved back to the U.S. in like my final like half year in the final semester, and I was interning in venture capital in San Francisco, and it was supposed to be my dream internship, doing early stage investing. And I actually like hated it. I like hated every minute of the internship, and not because they weren't wonderful people, like fantastic people. They gave me great opportunities, but the entire time I was in this like mental pain where I was like, this is just a deeply wrong use of my time. Like every minute that I spend here is just like complete waste. Like it's so misallocated. And it got to the point where I couldn't eat because my stomach was hurting thinking about how I wasn't building, what became Pronto. And I couldn't sleep at night because I was thinking about how I wasn't building Pronto. And it got to the point where, my like actual quality of life was degraded because I wasn't building this. So when people ask me like, oh, why did you start Pronto? It's, like I couldn't live not starting Pronto, like quite literally physically could not live not starting Pronto. And then after I graduated in May 2024, I started working on it, and all the like mental pain went away. And now I don't sleep or eat, but for a different reason. I'm just too busy. Yeah, I think it's just a level of obsession that to know what that feels like you have to go through it yourself, which is just like it's this such a deep obsession where it completely takes over your life, or like you cannot do anything other than kind of go pursue it.
So when people wonder which idea to stick with, it's probably the one that consumes you.
Yes.
That you think about while you're, say, at a job or while you're trying to sleep, that one thing that keeps coming back to you.
Yes.
Am
So
I articulating that well?
Starting a company is very hard.
Yeah.
The entire startup journey is extremely difficult. And
what's the hardest part?
If you've probably heard the phrase like eating glass and staring into the abyss. And that is extremely true about starting a company, right? As a founder, you are constantly eating glass. You have to do hard things, horrible things happen to you all the time. Like there's constantly roadblocks. There's constantly like every time you think you're winning, another thing comes your way. And staring into the abyss, because you as a founder, there's no like your trajectory isn't clear, right? And your survival isn't clear, right? You're facing existential risk all the time, right? And I think the only way that you can get through, eating glass, staring into the abyss, is if you're so deeply obsessed with your idea and your vision that you are willing to go through that pain, and you'll do anything to kind of make it come true. Mm-hmm. And so I think if I wasn't so deeply obsessed about my vision and the mission of the company, I would not have made it this far, because I would have given up much earlier.
What's been your most challenging day? You spoke about the fact that, and I relate with this, right? Like you think you're winning and you think that, yes, finally, and then something explodes and you're like, oh my God, I have to put that fire out. What's been your most challenging day so far?
There are many, many, many things I could say for this. Single most challenging day. I think one of the things is when you like something very very avoidable happens, and you know it's like your own fault, that like it's your own fault. So for us, kind of a couple weeks after we launched, like the entire app broke, and like all the customers were super angry and all of this about like, well, I can't book, or like I booked and then no one showed up because like we never even received their booking. And I realized that, like, oh, okay, I had made extremely poor like engineering hiring decisions very early on, and then it like led to this kind of mess. And when you realize that this was like entirely avoidable and completely your fault, that's what makes it the worst, because you let the entire team down, and the entire team was disappointed that the operations team had worked so hard and everything was falling apart, or so it seemed at the time. And to know that you let the team down, and also you've kind of set the company back because of something that like was completely your own fault, or totally avoidable. That's what made that day so horrible. Was I was just like, okay, this was completely on me, and like it was completely avoidable. But
It is what it is.
it is what it is. And I think that's the thing. If you're founders, you'll make so many mistakes. But if you dwell on kind of those mistakes and are always looking back at what you regret doing, like you'll never get anywhere. And so you have to just one of our investors tells me all the time, like, you either win or you learn. And that's kind of my mantra, which is just like, we either win or we learn. And I think the whole journey and whether you succeed as a founder is a lot about how fast you learn and like how quickly you execute on those learnings. And so that's always my goal. It's like every time something happens, like I think my immediate thought is like, okay, what are the takeaways from here, and how can we make sure this never happens again? And I think another like very bad day for us was, so we lost a team member who I had spent like a lot of time recruiting, and I was like very excited for them to join. And it was just a matter of like basically expectations were not aligned before that person joined. And there was like kind of a few people involved, and I kind of just like expected that expectations were aligned, and other people, and I trusted kind of that everything was going to be okay. And I didn't do the work myself to make sure that was the case. And then everything kind of came to a head a couple months later, and at that moment I realized that like, oh, okay, I think as a founder your job is to recruit like a superhero team, right? And so losing someone you think is really great is like a huge setback, because like you kind of failed on a core mission, part of your mission, right? And so for me that was probably the most upsetting thing that's happened, was losing that team member. And I think that again I felt was completely avoidable, right? Like all it had taken was like if I had sat down with everyone at the very beginning to make sure expectations were aligned. And even at that, what really got me was at the moment where the person was coming on board and everything was kind of getting settled, I had this inkling like, oh, I should make sure. I'm not sure expectations are aligned, but I just kind of brushed it off. And at that time, I think I just didn't. You
didn't act on it.
I didn't act on it, and I think I was like in some senses like a little too complacent. And knowing that my complacency then led to someone like a superhero leaving the team, that was like probably the single worst day.
Yeah. What do you think of work-life balance?
I think work-life balance is a great thing for other people.
Yeah. So when you stop it, I think work-life balance is great. I was like, I don't believe you. And then you said for other people.
Yeah, for other people.
Yeah. So what's a typical day in your life?
Yeah. So typical day, there is no typical day in my life, is what I'd say. I
break it up into like broad buckets, right? Like very early in the morning, very late at night, this is typically what I'm doing, or I'm working here, or I'm in this city, like just broadly.
Yeah, so in which city I am, actually, it changes every day. So there are days where I have breakfast in Mumbai, lunch in Gurgaon, and dinner in Bangalore. And that's not an exaggeration. That was like a few Saturdays ago.
Yeah.
I think early morning is when I get up, and I usually am catching up on emails or texts or calls with US based folks. And then also looking at reports of like the previous day in terms of kind of the numbers and where we tracked. And then kind of after that, like I like to spend as much time as possible on ground and at our hubs. Like my belief is that, in terms of operational issues, it's much more difficult to detect them if you're sitting in, an air-conditioned office versus on ground. And the second is you need to have empathy for your supply side and the workers.
Yeah.
And I think if you are sitting detached in some AC office, you completely lose touch with what's happening and the conditions that they're in. And my thought is it would be unfair of me to expect a worker to sit in one of these hubs if I wasn't willing to sit in that same hub, right? And therefore, it's very important. I also feel much more motivation when working from a hub. We have an office now, and I feel like depressed sitting in there. Whereas I'd rather sit in like some like humid basement with no AC or something, and that to me is much more motivating and gets me to work a lot harder. So I spend a good portion of my day there. One thing I'll do is I'll look at to see, okay, bookings are getting delayed from this hub. The booking will come in, and I'll like race after kind of the worker on and like chase after them and like kind of track, okay, X number of seconds were spent on this, X number of seconds were
just
spent there, and mapping the journey and then figuring out where can we extract seconds and where was kind of time leakage. And so that's something that I'll spend maybe half the day doing. Then I'll go back and I have usually a lot of calls in the afternoon and early evening. And then kind of late evening, I usually have my first meal of the day. And then I look at kind of performance reports and catch up on emails, do calls with, other US-based folks. And that's kind of how I end my days.
So if you were to map a typical 23-year-old, right, like there's work, but there is the social aspect of it. How has that been for you?
I would say, I think so if you're aware of the like economic concept of consumption smoothing, I'm not doing consumption smoothing, is what I'd say. So I've deferred consumption quite a bit. And so I would say I'm not doing, I only work no social right now, but I'm sure in the future I will kind of introduce more balance to the work life. Like I don't know what percent the typical 23-year-old spends on social versus work, but for me it's like 0% social, which is obviously a change versus pre-Pronto. But I think every time I think about like, oh, do I want to go hang out with friends? There's nothing I'd rather do than work. And I think that just comes from obsession. Like I would rather spend my time looking at reports on kind of operational performance versus going and hang out with my friends. And I think over time it's important to reintroduce that, but not yet.
Not yet. Okay. How do you keep up with competition, right? Because even with the quick commerce boom, you saw many different players cropping up, and this was obviously in the product space. But now with services, what if somebody else were to produce a Pronto-like model and say, okay, we'll do it too? What's your differentiator?
Yeah. So there are three things the customer cares about: quality, safety, and reliability. And the way to win is just execution on those three things. And so driving quality, safety, reliability is like everything we do needs to be to that end, right? And so like for me, the quality, quality is what I'm most proud of. And our quality complaint rate is for every 6,000 bookings, we get 2 quality complaints. And that should be 0, but is also just like far and away best in class. And I think the way to win is just being extremely consistent and thorough with execution. And I think that's difficult to do as you scale, because as you scale, it's really easy to cut corners and to suffer on those three things. And I think as you scale, the way you do it has to change. It has to be much more data driven, and there has to be much more observability. But I think on quality especially, you have to treat like every quality complaint as a plane crash rather than a car crash, right? Mm-hmm. So a car crash is a statistic, and like some level of car crashes everyone's like okay with, right? Like, like we expect some level of crashes. But every time there's a plane crash, there's an investigation. There's process changes, there's policy changes, there's regulation. And I think that is how quality complaints have to be treated. And that's how you win, right? Like is just being extremely rigorous with execution. And it's really boring. A lot of times it's like super boring work to like figure out, second by second on reliability or the like the absolute minutia of an SOP that we give to our workers, and figuring out how to drive the incremental, changes in quality, safety, reliability. But that's how you win, right? It's the boring details. It's driving consistency. It's attention to detail. It's just rigor, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. So we have some quick, fun questions for you. So you have to humor me and tell me what you would do in a particular situation. If a team member is talented but always late, do you fire, fix, or ignore?
Oh, we have plenty of these,
Oh,
so
yeah.
ignore.
Ignore. Okay. The investor asks to change your brand vision for more funding. Do you
Walk away.
adjust,
Walk away.
negotiate,
Walk
or
away.
walk
Walk away.
Okay. A viral opportunity, but it needs overnight execution. You take it, delay it, or you pass.
Everything we do is overnight, so take it.
Okay. Someone older and way more experienced questions your capability. Do you convince, ignore, or prove with results?
Prove with results.
Your company's first major PR controversy. Do you speak immediately, wait 24 hours, or let the lawyers handle?
All of the above.
Oh, they pass. A competitor tries to exactly copy your product. Do you fight it? Do you innovate faster? Do you collaborate, or do you acquire?
I guess execute better.
You have to choose one. Speed or perfection?
Speed.
Choose one. Growth or profit?
Growth.
And you choose one. Team happiness or team efficiency?
A happy team is the most efficient.
Awesome. So we're down to like the last question, right? And I think that what would be great is if you could give a piece of advice to those who are looking to start up on how they can do it better, how they can execute better, how they know whether they're even sticking to the right idea, whether they should be fluid, whether they should be adapt. It's yours.
Yeah, just start doing.
Yeah.
There's I think people spend a lot of time on like theoretical market research, but in the absence of information, and you always lack information if you have just an idea, before you start doing it, you lack information, right? And the only way to gain information is to experiment. So just start doing, and then through experimentation, you gather information, and then you think. Right? So if you think about the balance of thinking versus doing, at the very early stages, you should index to entirely just doing. And then once you collect information, you can think about it. But I think most people index way more towards thinking than doing. And it just creates inertia, essentially.
Yeah. So just begin.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm super excited and energized listening to you. So I'm going to work harder. And I think so many people are going to have so much to look up to. And keep going. And we're all rooting for you.
Thanks.